you walk out with $100 million, and if you succeed, you get stock options and they go up in value, or you got also $100 million. So where's the risk? I have to say, at least the hedge fund manager, he has his own money on the line. That's why actually very few hedge funds really failed. Some of them went out of business because of bad performance, but they didn't go bankrupt. The way the banks, essentially all of them are bust. They went bust, but they were bailed out by the system. If you're a small entrepreneur in Illinois or in Dakota or wherever that may be, and you go bust, nobody will help you. But if you're a big bank, they'll help you.
Amazing. I know it's 2 in the morning. They're in Switzerland. They're in Zurich. We're very, very honored.
No, I'm in Zurich, in Thailand.
Oh, you're in Thailand. That's why it's 2 in the morning. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. What time in the morning is it there, Doc?
Now it's 1:20 in the morning. All
right. Well, you were very, very nice to be on with us. We'll be back after this quick break. He was joining us from Thailand. GloomBoomDoom.com is Dr. Faber's site. I'm going to ask him, where is all this going? What can we individually do to protect ourselves? Straight ahead with Dr. Faber. Just got Dr. Faber for this segment and part of the next. I specifically want to ask him about what individuals should do, because his track record's been pretty darn accurate on what's happening. What's his take on gold being driven down today? When does he expect Bernanke to bring in the QE3? And why has Bernanke made this decision? I know it's about squeezing the public while posing as the good guy, but what does the ruling class think they're going to do with all this? Because, I mean, sure, they grab all the money and power, but they wreck the society, so they're wrecking what they've actually captured. But I guess in war, a few eggs get broken.
Yes, this is precisely what I've been writing about. You know, even if you're the monopolist, there is a price above which you shouldn't go, because if you go above that price, the demand falls off a cliff. So even the monopolist, he has to maximize his profits with a price that is halfway reasonable. And I believe intentionally or unintentionally, the so-called 1%, and as I said before, I think it's not 1%, but it's more like 0.25% of the population. They've driven their wealth to an extreme that actually at some stage will lead to a massive wealth destruction. Because each time in history you had a few people that were incredibly rich and the masses were kind of impoverished. It came to social strife or to hyperinflation or to revolutions or to war. And in war times, basically everybody loses out. So of course, there's some war profiteers, but they also lose out in the end, frequently with their lives. And so my view is maybe the well-to-do should consider policies that are more equitable to the masses. And I think what they should have done is oppose the money print by the Federal Reserve instead of encouraging it. Because don't forget, Wall Street has benefits from money printing in the sense that if markets go down and there is money printing, then the water level is refilled and the asset prices go up and performance fees come back in and so forth. So their tendency is, of course, always to encourage money printing.
If you were in charge, instead of the G20, what would you do to try to resuscitate the global economy?
Well, I think, you see, I disagree with the Keynesian theory that government spending stimulates the economy. I believe if you have a dollar and you give it to the private sector, mistakes will happen, but the dollar will be invested more efficiently than if you give it to the governments. In particular, if you give it to the Obama administration, it's a complete waste. That is the problem. And I think if you really wanted to revive the global economy, but the policymakers, they will not admit that. Austerity, in the sense to cut government spending 50%, that would help the global economy. But of course, the policymakers will make you believe that if you have austerity, it will be a disaster for the economy. It's like if AIG would have gone bankrupt, it would have been a disaster for the global economy. No, you just can ring-fence the operations that have a social function, like the insurance operation, the derivatives operation. You just kick out and let Goldman Sachs, Citigroup and JP Morgan solve that mess. And you guarantee the depositors of Citigroup and Morgan and let them essentially lose their derivatives position. And so I believe that the policymakers and the media and essentially the Keynesian economists, they all brainwash the public in the sense of telling the public, oh, if the government hadn't intervened through the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, the crisis would have been much worse. No, there wouldn't have been a crisis if they hadn't intervened with the government-sponsored enterprises already for years, and with the money printing essentially for the last 20 years. There wouldn't have been a crisis.
That's right. They create the problem and then pose as the savior. Joining us from Thailand, Dr. Marc Faber. We're going to come right back, sir, with a final segment with you to talk about what you think individuals can do on average and investors to protect themselves, because they're not going to listen to you or Ron Paul or others. They're going to go ahead with the Keynesian model. We'll be right back.
Alex Jones Show.
We've got some breaking news that I'll cover after Dr. Faber leaves us in 7-8 minutes. You know, I did that Mark Moreno interview of Climate Depot, where we broke down all these academics saying arrest people that disagree with man-made global warming. And we talked about that professor that says we're mentally ill and need to be treated. YouTube took our video down and is threatening to suspend an account with 190+ million views on it. Again, that's the political correctness. That's how authoritarian these people are. And I'm going to find out who did this. It's time this professor, if she's the one that did it, has legal action, because I've had it with these people. They think this is the Soviet Union, and it's not. You better use your First Amendment or you're going to lose it. Dr. Faber, on a separate issue, there's all these calls to censor the web, to spy on people worldwide. I mean, why do you think the world is lurching towards authoritarianism, or do you disagree with that statement?
Well, I think that if you look at history, you know, even in a democracy, you get then power structures. And if you read Animal Farm, the regime starts always with good intentions, or even communism started with good intentions, and then you have an elite that comes out of it and abuses the system. And I believe the political class today is so much involved in business and in money making. As pointed out, the members of Congress, they outperform every other fund manager because of their inside information, that they don't want to lose power. And they realize at some point that it's not about representing the interest of the people, but it's about controlling the people, and that they need armies and police not to protect the people, but to protect them against the people. And I think we're moving into that stage now in the United States, and also, by the way, other Western democracies, whereas here in Asia and the other emerging markets, we're moving towards a more liberal society. So we have different cycles in societies. And I'm sorry to say, in the US, I always feel that you are under threat And, you know, you go through an airport, it's like going through a Gestapo police station.
Well, you're right, Doctor. In closing, spend a few minutes on what you would do as an individual investor tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're covering over at the Gloom Boom Doom Report.
Yes. You know, the viciousness of money print is that they are symptoms of inflation, but they don't occur all at the same time. So basically an investor should have been in NASDAQ stocks until March 2000. And after that, he should have been essentially long gold and so forth. And it shifts this inflation from one asset to another. It's very difficult to maneuver and know exactly what will happen and where the best performing asset will be. We all don't know how the world will look in 5 years' time. My advice to people in the US is I would hold some assets outside the US, whether it's real estate or funds, and I would have the custody outside the US. There's no point to own assets outside the US, but have the custody in the US. And so diversification is very important. Secondly, as you point out in your program, one day the issue may not be about performing well, but actually surviving and performing relatively well. In other words, when the whole world loses 90% of its asset base, that you only lose 30% or 50%. So I think that you should own some gold, and but you have to own it in physical form and not on leverage, that you can withstand the downside volatility, such as we have now. We peaked out at 1921, $1,921 on September 6, 2011. We're now just at about 1,600. So we had quite a significant correction. I think we're still in a correction phase. And I would own some equities, diversified portfolio. My preference is for equities in Asia because I think they're cheaper and they have different yields. I can assemble here a portfolio of equities that would have a dividend yield on the portfolio of, say, 5-6% quite easily. So compared to government bonds, I think that's quite attractive. I would avoid 30 years government bonds, except maybe as a trade for the next 10 days or so. But by and large, I would avoid that asset class because I think that particularly in a deflationary scenario, fiscal deficit would go ballistic because the tax revenues would collapse. So in either case, inflation or deflation, you're going to lose money with your treasury bonds. And I think in the US, in the South, the real estate market, homes are now very reasonably priced by international standards. I've seen homes in Atlanta that were cheaper than we could have bought here in Thailand.
In closing, Dr. Faber, who again is the editor and publisher of the Gloom Boom and Doom Report, gloomboomdoom.com, on the current path that the Keynesians are taking us on, clearly going for an authoritarian system, setting all this up, historically, what's your gut view on where all this is going?
As I said, nobody knows, but my best guess is that they will print money, and much more than they have. What we've seen is just an appetizer. Hasn't been anything compared to what is yet to come. And that this will impoverish the lower income groups, including the middle class. And then the social climate in the country will deteriorate very badly.